Hey, everybody. Welcome to DogShirtTV. It is Wednesday, September 11th, the 23rd anniversary of the September 11th attacks. It is 6 o'clock p.m. because DogShirtTV starts on time. God damn it. And I, Benjamin Wittes, am pissed off. And here's why I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off because I went to the Polina Sunflower Garden today in front of the Russian embassy, where on Sunday I had, with a large group of people, replanted the garden one more time for the fall. And I had installed a hidden camera. And by Monday, that hidden camera was gone. So yesterday I put in a new hidden camera, and it today was gone. And that can only mean one thing, which is that the Russians have really figured out my whole hidden camera strategy, which leaves the beautiful sunflowers woefully unprotected against attack, which I expect imminently from my adversary in the embassy, whose name I do not know, but I call him Carla, after George Smiley's master spy adversary. Now, Carla is discovered my devious protection scheme of using hidden cameras to protect the sunflowers. And it required great sleuthing on Carla's part to figure this out, seeing as I was publishing the results, the feeds from the hidden cameras by way of embarrassing the Russians. And I was referring to those feeds as with phrases like video from my hidden camera. So it took a lot of work on the part of Carla to figure out what I was doing, how I was doing it, but they did figure it out. They have taken the hidden cameras, and I am fucking pissed off about it. And this requires a new strategy in protection of sunflowers. And I want to describe it to you right here. It is deterrence. Instead of protecting the sunflowers by trying to catch the Russians in the act of destroying them, hiring the homeless people to do it. We've kind of pieced together how this is working. Instead of trying to do any of that anymore, I'm laying down my doctrine. For every sunflower plant in that garden that is disturbed, I will not only lay its carcass on the driveway of the Russian embassy, which I have been doing, much to the irritation of local law enforcement. I will spend 1 hour on one separate evening projecting a sunflower on the Russian embassy. There are about 50 plants in there. And I've asked the keeper of the Polina Sunflower Garden to give me an accounting of exactly how many plants, so we know how many days we are talking about. If you fuck with one sunflower, there will be a special military operation projecting an image of a sunflower for 1 hour at an evening of my choosing this autumn. If you fuck with 39 sunflowers, there will be 39 evenings of 1 hour projection. And so, Carla, I'm talking to you man to man, spy to spy here. And I have one question for you. Do you feel lucky, punk? You think I'm bluffing? Do you think I won't spend 39 hours or 50 hours or 150 hours on 150 separate days projecting sunflowers on your embassy? And do you think for a minute, Ambassador Anatoly Antonov, that stunt won't be worth more attention in Moscow than just leaving the goddamn sunflowers alone? Just a question. I want to say one more thing to you, Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador and Carla, you are not allowed to have fun anymore. But we are, because we have Tyler McBrien here, and we had this fabulous fucking debate last night, and we are going to talk about it. And so, shifting tone, we're going from the pissed off to the joyous. Tyler McBrien is the editor of the managing editor of Lawfare.
I just got promoted.
Just got promoted. He took my job because I'm going to be spending all this time projecting sunflowers, having rashly committed to doing it, projecting sunflowers on Carla's place of work. So someone's going to have to do my job. It'll be Tyler. Tyler, I don't know if you've ever met Genevieve Della Fera. We call her GDF.
Nice to meet you.
That are going to be tough for you to figure out, but I'm sure you can manage it. I got one more administrative announcement related to our technology before we get started. We've done, GDF and I have done 2 of these shows, and I've forgotten to mention this on both of the shows. I'm mentioning it now. I am changing our policy about going to questions because I forget. I'm used to the old regime in which we go to questions and, people have kind of lined up and I bring them on. I cannot actually do that on this system. You have to request the ability to talk. So, members of the Greek chorus, there is no question period. You can ask a question at any time. If nobody's in the middle of a sentence, we will just accommodate you. If somebody's in the middle of a sentence, it may take me a while to get there if somebody's lined up to give a question. But anytime you have a question, just hit, I don't even know what that button looks like. Just hit it and it'll flag me and I will bring you on at the earliest possible convenience. So, questions all the time. If nobody says they have a question, I'm going to assume that nobody does, and we're just going to keep talking. Okay, administrative announcements done. Monologue expressing rage in defense of inanimate sunflowers done. New deterrence policy articulated. Rash commitment made for inordinate amounts of time in my evenings. Committed. Enough eccentricities. Tyler McBrien, what was your favorite moment in the debate? Was it the cat eating? Was it, there are so many options here. Was it the Taylor Swift aftershock? Was it, I don't know, like, what was the best moment?
It's a great question. Today, the Lawfare team was doing like a national security roundup of the national security substance from the debate. And so I wanted to first talk about the eating cats thing. So I just Control F cats to the transcript. And I pulled up just a single answer of Donald Trump's. And it was such a psychedelic experience just reading the one answer that it made me realize just how much crazy shit must have washed over me during the debate. Just the sheer volume of it, that I'm sure I just missed so many things. But I do think that the cat's question had to take it. To remind people, this was the question that he got. Oh, sorry, no, I'm mixing up things up. I got to go with obviously, performing transgender surgeries on illegal aliens in prison. It felt like, Mad Libs or like the worst college improv sketch prompt in the world. But the best part of that question, which people will probably forget immediately for obvious reasons, is that it was a question about fracking. So getting from point A to point B, the only person who could take us there is Donald Trump. So that has to be my favorite.
All right, but let us take, and GDF, I am going to assume you have the next question, and we're just going to switch back and forth.
Sounds great.
Let's actually take this seriously for a second. I'm hanging with like what is the train of logic, or the train of, it's not logic, it's something, it's some kind of stream of consciousness that got him to, she's promising to perform transgender surgery on illegal immigrants in prison, which is, I think, the claim. Is that right?
That's right, Ben.
Okay, let's go. What's the law? How did we get there?
GDF, did you want to take this one, or was this one to me?
This one's to you, Tyler. I don't like to go too deep into the psyche of Donald Trump.
I think this one was the biggest challenge because, Ben, earlier today you shared with me your theory on the Abdul question as the apparent leader of the Taliban who was shown a picture of his house. I think this one may have been a function of a jumble of debate prep. I think he saw this as an opportunity to Frankenstein together, some red meat for his base. And what could be more enraging than performing transgender surgeries on illegal aliens? What could be more enraging than those two things together is if they're also in prison. So I think it was just a maximizing effect. That's the best I can come up with, but maybe Ben, you have a better translation.
No, I don't. I think that one, it was like everything that he hates put together in a single policy proposal and placed in her mouth. It wasn't that like he thinks she's going to do this. It was that she's promising to do this and he says it to her face. So it's like, it's like not at a rally where you can say he's sort of lying about her. He's lying to her about herself. And I think that's just a kind of, John Hawkinson is here. And if I just looked at him and said, John, why are you promising to eat live chickens pulled out of Tyler's underwear?
And we cut his mic as he attempts to answer.
Right. It's just such a weird thing to do that I can only attribute to what you're describing.
This is a great segue to my question.
Oh, okay.
So my question was, it seemed to me like Harris chose not to close. She had so many options to turn to the camera and say, Ben Wittes is batshit. Does he really believe that Tyler has chickens in his underwear? And she chose not to do that. And I don't understand why.
Oh, I think that kind of makes sense, though. The last thing you remember is this enraged orange man screaming at you about random things that have irritated him in the last 90 minutes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think it's a refusal to meet him on his terms. I think you saw this also. There was a soundbite that went around shortly before the debate where someone asked Kamala Harris directly about Trump's, racist claim that she decided to be black recently. And I think she said something like, same old shit, next question, So I think that's the same strategy, which I think is a smart one.
I guess that's fair. It seems to me like it could be incredibly powerful to punch back on some of that and sort of break the fourth wall and address us. Let me know, Ben, if I should click the leave button or just hang out here.
Well, so I think as a general policy, people, members in good standing of the Greek chorus should dismiss themselves when they feel like their question is adequately answered. I think that's the way we should operate until such time as somebody's abusing it and I feel called upon to learn how to do the dismissal myself. I will say people should hang around for, should not appoint themselves guests. And so should show up for their question and then, return to the audience. But I am disinclined to figure out how to, to boot people. So I leave that at your discretion.
Sounds good. Thanks. Bye.
Ciao. GDF, the floor is yours.
Okay. So my question is, what do you think during that very pregnant pause before she referred to the gentleman to my right? was going through her mind.
Is that to
What do
me?
you think, Tyler?
I don't know. I think to John's question, I think certain people were craving, her to, meet him on his level, punch back. But I just think what was going through her head was just a lot of white knuckle self-restraint, which she was coached to do.
I totally disagree.
Okay, good.
I think it was completely planned, and we know exactly what the model for it is, which is Barack Obama at the convention making a dick joke, but going like, a small crowd, and doing that exactly the same pregnant pause, and then saying something polite, but everybody knows what he meant. And she says and what's going through your head is crazed, misogynistic dickhead to my right. And then she fills it in with gentleman. And we all know exactly what she means. And I think it's a form of joke that arose because people have this very strong desire to say certain things about him, and yet you don't want to make the mistake that Marco Rubio made, which is in debates with him, which is to actually go there and then, the pig wrestling in the mud, you're in the mud and the pig likes it, rule kicks in. And so if you're just kind of like pregnant with the mud, then you get away with both, and you haven't said anything inappropriate. Do you buy it?
To a certain extent. I think this goes sort of to John's question about why doesn't she break the fourth wall and bring everyone in on the joke, because I think everyone is already in on the joke, so we know what she's saying, to your point, Ben. But I do think that the way to get to Trump, from what I've seen, is by making fun of him in certain ways. So calling into question the crowd size, calling his rallies boring.
But using crowd as a metaphor for penis.
Yeah. Right.
I mean,
that always
so subtle.
Yeah. Yeah. But I keep going. And then, the whole weird thing. I think these insults weirdly do work on a bully. The best way to disarm a bully is to make fun of them and fight fire with fire to a certain extent. So I think that's the only place I would diverge.
So GDF, what was your favorite moment of the debate?
I mean, there were quite a few, and I'd have to take a minute because I have some concepts of a favorite moment, but I'm not really sure if I've had enough time. I mean, almost 10 years to come up with an answer, but I think that would probably be my favorite moment. How about you, Ben?
That's good.
We were in on the joke there.
So my favorite moment, I want to answer it with two separate, I want to cheat and say, if you're saying, what do I think was the most important and effective moment of the debate for her in electoral terms, I think it was the reference to selling out Poland with specific reference to Polish Americans in Pennsylvania. And I think that was that was a targeted strike at a very specific electoral community that she needs to make headway in. Because if you think about like what's the demographic that she's having most trouble with, it's white people of a certain set of ethnic backgrounds, and any 5% of them that you can move that's eroding his so the fracking stuff is super important that way. And talking about foreign policy in terms of the ethnic communities that are let's be frank, have a lot of college educated or college educated men, because you already have the college educated women, and non-college educated, both men and women, that shit is gold. Now, which moment did I enjoy the most? I really did love the cat eating, and partly I loved it because I'm sufficiently off social media these days that when something is trending in the right-wing ecosystem, I don't know about it. And so I first learned about eating cats in Springfield, Illinois, yesterday afternoon, listening to the Bulwark podcast when Tim Miller actually predicted that Trump was going to go off on this rant.
Did he
because
really?
because it's sufficiently marinated, and apparently JD Vance had tweeted something about "please don't eat us," had actually turned it into a cannibalism thing, and so Tim had very perceptively picked up that this was a sufficiently baked, kooky, like quite racist thing in the right-wing sphere, that it was going to show up in some Trump rant, and then it did. And so I really enjoyed that, both as a matter of like, it must, if you're not in that world, it must have just come out of nowhere. So that was my favorite. I immediately posted on Thread an image of a cat sandwich, which I a kitten between two buns, which I thought was fun.
I have a quick question for both of you, kind of. So just kind of thinking about the insulation of that ecosystem, media ecosystem, it's scary, because when you have a conversation with someone who's even tangentially part of it, their facts are still so disparate from what I think the average person is consuming. And then it makes me kind of wonder, how effective do you think she was last night at reaching like a low information voter? Because he sounds harebrained, but some of the stuff, to me, but some of the stuff that he's talking about is just, it's for a very specific audience, and I can't tell how much of reality is breaking through. So I just kind of want to get a gauge from both of you, like what you thought, like if it would actually flip some people.
What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I don't know.
Who's she reaching?
I tend to be a bit pessimistic on this point. I'm not sure, how many people she reached who aren't already, sympathetic to what she's saying. And I don't want to get to, the matrix about this, but I always think that term low information voter is funny, because as you said, it's sort of just like different information voter. At this point, like, you start to question reality. I mean, the things that he was saying about eating cats, it was such a straight line from these strange racist conspiracy theories on the right-wing media sphere that he then just spoke into reality on national television in front of tens of millions of people. If your buddy at the bar was talking like that, you'd be like, "Hey man, you're too online, like go touch grass." But if Trump is saying it on the stage, like he speaks it into existence for so many people, and it becomes real for so many people, which is the scary part. I'm forgetting what your original question was, but there's like it's a really troubling thing that I don't know what the answer is. And if you could say this, because it didn't surprise me that he brought it up, but you could say the same thing about me. I'm too online. I should go touch grass as well. But the House GOP Judiciary Committee, I think, official account was tweeting about this. Ted Cruz was tweeting about this. I mean, these are people with huge platforms, and they were tweeting about it before the debate. So you could see there's just a clear line. Yeah, but Ben, I'm curious your thoughts as someone who is not on Twitter, currently
anymore. So I think there's in any of these debates, you start with the assumption that 47% of the electorate is baked in for each side. So the universe of people, like Donald Trump will not get less than 47% of the vote. Kamala Harris, if she sets herself on fire in Springfield, Ohio, while eating a cat, will get 47% of the vote, right? Like there's, and so the range of people that you're talking to realistically is the 6% who are not encompassed by that. And you're also trying to depress the turnout on the other side and excite your own turnout, right? And so I think, number one, she certainly excited her own turnout. So mission accomplished in that regard. Kamala World is very happy today. That's going to cause lots of people to do lots of things like more volunteering, donating more money, talking to more people about this. This is how candidates excite their side. So that's the easy part. I do think that a performance like that on Donald Trump's part has base suppressive effects, not because anybody in his base is going to say, oh, you know, I'm going to vote for her instead of him because Uncle Ranty sounded really crazy. But I do think that there is, you know, the more you create the air of inevitable loserness, the less incentive there is for people in the base to actually vote. And so can you have, you know, we don't like to talk about voter suppression because, you know, it has all this, but voter suppression is totally legitimate if it's done by means of demoralizing people and convincing them that they're going to lose anyway, right? Legal, using the law to suppress votes, but using psychology to suppress the other side's vote is a totally normal part of electioneering. And I think if you're Donald Trump, a marginal Donald Trump voter, somebody who maybe was thinking about voting for RFK Jr., maybe thinking about staying home, you're more likely to stay home today. I think the persuasion side is the most difficult part of that question. And I guess I so don't understand the psychology of the undecided voter that I feel like, you know, the undecided voter to me is a creature of Scott Shapiro jokes and Sarah Longwell podcasts and focus groups. And I so don't understand the psychology of it that I just don't, I can't pretend to have an informed opinion. I will say I can't imagine she did herself any harm.
I actually kind of want to push back on that a little bit. In a weird way, I'm a little worried just because this sounds bizarre, but she did so well and she was so eloquent and so prepared and she was everything you would want your president to be. But she is a she and she is a woman. And I think that there is a certain percentage of people who that they might be threatened by that in a strange way. And I think that those would be the ones who may not get off the couch if there was another man on the stage with Trump, but perhaps they might be more animated because she did so well. I'd like to hear what you guys think in response to that.
Yeah, I think those people exist in, you know, far too high numbers. But I don't think she would have maybe ever gotten those people with a poor performance. It almost sounds like, again, this is maybe a too online reference, but a New York Times PitchBot like tweet of like, did Kamala Harris do too well? Or Kamala Harris did too well in the debate. Here's why that's bad for her campaign or something like that. I completely understand what you're saying, but I just don't know if she would have had a chance with those kinds of extremely misogynistic voters that you're describing.
it's like there was a whole, like, I don't see a lot of things, but today there was a whole trend on Twitter about her having like listening devices in her earrings, and those were somehow why she performed so well. And so that was kind of what just made me think, I'm like, huh.
You know, I think once you're dealing with the people who believe in hidden listening devices installed in people's, head, and I say that as somebody who, began this by talking about my hidden listening devices. But I think when they're installed in your teeth or your ear, like you're dealing with pretty crazy people. Look, you may be right, and but the
not.
argument can't be like, well, she should do badly because she'll like. I want to give you one piece of data that pushes in the other direction, which is CNN did a spot poll on who won the debate, and that had something like 64% for her and 37% or something, 36% for Trump. Which means if we assume that he's giving, that he's getting 47% of the vote at a minimum, that 10% of people who will vote for him nonetheless acknowledge that she kicked his ass. That strikes me as are we saying that none of those people are persuadable?
I read that as the debate doesn't matter as much as we think it does. I think it was Julia Yaffe who had a great point. It was a very sobering thing to read right after the debate. She said Hillary won her debates too. Maybe we are here to talk about the debate, but it was one night. It was a big night. It was huge viewership, huge platform for both candidates, and an introduction to Kamala on the national stage in many ways after the DNC. But people can chalk it up to an off night for Trump or something like that.
Okay, so let's play that out. Let's assume we have this really cool baseline in the polls right now, which is, if you look at the Real Clear Politics average, they're basically dead even in the national level. I mean, she's maybe up 1.1% or something, and they're dead even effectively in all the swing states, save that she's up a couple points in Wisconsin. So if we agree that she won the debate, what counts as winning the debate in a way that matters? If, like, over the next week in the polls, what counts as a Pyrrhic victory, winning the debate but losing the war, right? If she doesn't achieve X, you say, with such victories, one more such victory and we'll be ruined. And what counts as a kind of fought to a draw? Like, yeah, she won this round, but the election's not going to be decided on September 10th. What do you think, GDF?
I think truly winning the debate would be the conversion of voters, even if they're not willing to admit it. So perhaps,
how many?
Depends on the swing state. I mean, enough to secure the Electoral College. I mean, it's because Trump doesn't want to do another one, right? Like that's the thing. So like, does this change? This is probably, if he doesn't do another one, the only time you're really going to see them head to head. And so the comparison of looking at the two of them in the camera was startling, because you had him and then you had the MVP, and it just, obviously I am very biased, but it was, I thought, a very clear contrast, regardless of what you think or who you think won. So I think that the conversion of voters would be the true winning. I think the Pyrrhic victory is people acknowledging that she won the debate, but still saying, well, I'm still going to vote for Trump. Like, that is the Pyrrhic victory in my mind. And then the draw is she has this victory, but then gets put on defense by like Trump's social media campaign in some way, because she was pretty aggressive and I liked it. I thought that it was a good thing. So those are my thoughts.
What do you think, Tyler? How would you, what if a week from now, what looks like a true win to you?
Yeah, I think I agree with that, especially the first part. If we see significant movement in the polls in the swing states, especially, I think a Pyrrhic victory looks like the sound bites that are more favorable to Trump, the things that are clipped that reverberate through social media that make him look better and make her look aggressive, or, you know, make her look like a, you know, an imposing woman or something like that. If those make, you know, go more viral and reverberate, you know, farther, that's a Pyrrhic victory. Because even though she won, like, through the, like, sitting there and watching the debate in full is a much different experience from taking off bite-sized chunks a month from now, and, you know, as we get closer to the election. So I think that could ultimately hurt her. To Genevieve's earlier point, which I pushed back against, I'm kind of coming around to it now. I think, you know, if you take off bite-sized chunks of it, it could actually look worse for her. Yeah.
All right. I want to propose an alternative way to think about it, which is the victory is not going to be seen in the polls. It's going to be over the next 2 weeks, whether the significant conversation shifts to Trump's cognitive readiness and appropriateness. Like, is the conversation all about, is this guy too old and too frickin' crazy? Which is what, you know, some of us have believed for a long time, but that conversation was all about Biden, at least the too old and too impaired stuff. And I think his performance, quite apart from her performance, his performance last night was so bizarre. You know, so peculiar and so sustained, and unlike a Trump rally, ran for an hour and 45 minutes, that probably 30 million people saw. And so does this trigger a conversation that is sustained about Trump's, you know, cognitive capacity to be president? That seems to me to be a big win, irrespective of what happens in the polls. Pyrrhic victory is movement in the national polls, but no significant movement in the key states. And fought to a draw is no significant change in a conversation, but a small movement in the polls that may or may not be sustained over the next 2 months. Eve Gamond, this is the second call I have seen you on today. It's great to see you, and the floor is yours.
Great to see you all. Yeah, actually, my question is quite short. Do you think that the misogynistic crowd reacts differently to Harris than to Clinton?
Super interesting question. What do you guys think?
Tyler, do you want to do, or I can go?
No, go ahead.
Go for it.
Okay, I think that they did react a little bit differently because I think the presentation was different. And I think that Vice President Harris probably learned quite a bit from the debate, from Hillary Clinton's debate. And I think she kept it very centered on the people at home. And I do think that a lot of her dialogue was, yes, this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do for you. And I thought that that was different because also, I mean, Hillary Clinton's debate, we hadn't had like really a President Trump yet. And so that's a huge thing because he was an unknown thing and she's defending and saying all these things, but we don't actually have a baseline for how threatening he is to democracy because we don't know his temperament if you're not like in the New York real estate industry, I guess. So that was my immediate reaction.
What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is related to your last answer, Ben, about a shift in media coverage and how you characterized it as so bizarre. But I think it wasn't such a bizarre Trump performance. I think it just was such a stark contrast. I think it was such a stark contrast because the person at the other podium was giving such a sobering, sort of normal performance, a very good, strong performance, but a normal performance, as opposed to the first debate with Biden, which the focus was on his cognitive abilities. So I think Trump was almost a constant in his bizarre performance, and it was just brought to life more with a different opponent. So I think that also had a lot to do with it, related to what Genevieve was saying about how we know what this man has done and how he sounds and, what his rallies are like. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I will just add a couple things on this point. The first is that, the variables here are a little bit overdetermined. There was a huge amount of super misogyny in people's dealing with Hillary Clinton, but people also had a 20 plus year relationship with Hillary Clinton as a major public figure. And people hated her with a passion that was inspired by many things, of which misogyny was one, but there were a bunch of others, some of them trivial, some of them not so trivial, some of them policy oriented, and some of them really deflections of her husband. And so the public relationship with Hillary Clinton is a super complicated animal that is not really true of Kamala Harris. The second is that Kamala Harris is not just a woman, she's also Black. And so when people treat her with contempt, and I think many more people, at least until recently, have had contempt for Kamala Harris than have hated her. Like she's treated as a sort of trivial figure, not as an evil figure. Is that because people are misogynists, or because they're racists, or because there's some reason why Kamala Harris has inspired this in them? And that's a different question. She doesn't have a 25-year relationship with the national public on this stuff. She doesn't have a husband that was president and whose administration people feels very strongly about. And she doesn't have years and years and years of taking very strong positions on matters that are controversial and offending people as a result. And so I think there's actually she's hard to compare to Hillary in this regard, though the temptation is obviously overwhelming because she's the only other woman who's run for president as a national figure and debated Donald Trump, right? And so you have an obvious comparison, but I don't really know how to unpack the differences or similarities in people's responses. Len. Go. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Tyler,
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Tyler had a point, and then we'll go to your
ahead,
question.
Tyler.
Sure. Yeah. Just one more point. I think this is to Genevieve's point earlier as well. We know so much more about Donald Trump's misogyny as well. So in comparison, when he says things like she puts out or something like that, it strikes such a different chord after the E. Jean Carroll suit, after all that we learned in the New York criminal trial. It's such a different public knowledge of Trump's misogyny as well. So I think that's also a huge factor.
So, Len, we can hear you, but I'm getting a notice from the system that that there's a technical issue with your connection.
But you can see me, right?
We can see you and hear you.
So everything is working. It's just wrong.
Except that it's not recording you. And
Okay.
so when you state your question, I'm going to repeat your question so that people in the podcast version will be able to hear it.
Okay, and then we have to figure out how to get my Opera, my browser that I've been using since 1995. I've updated it a few times. Opera would fit on one floppy in those days. Anyway, you're going so fast that you keep moving beyond wherever I think I'm going to ask a question or make a comment. But with regard to the press coverage of last night, the media coverage, it's odd. I live in flyover country. We don't like to think of Chicago. It's a kind of a major market, but we're all blue here. But so the print editions of the national papers never have the events from the night before. So there isn't a single headline or story in the New York Times today in the print edition, which we still loyally get 3 or 4 papers of those things, except the little local tabloid that we have here did. But so that's one thing. But with regard to the comparison of the normalization of, we're all so used to his rallies. Well, first of all, we are, because we pay attention to that stuff. But also, the focus was so different last night because there was the contrast of her looking at him. The split screen was brilliant. That's very different from this hour and a half long rants. Here, she was there. She, they let him ramble on many times, and they let her interrupt, which was at first bugging me, and then I finally saying, "Yeah, go ahead, let him do it." So I think the focus was pretty good, and I'm not too worried about the immediate press coverage. I haven't seen much negative yet. I mean, you can find it, but even the Fox channels today, I downloaded a lot of clips because I make a weekly comedy news music video, and it's good to have some comedy for a change. But even the Fox programs were either trashing it or so silly. I mean, they were either seriously criticizing Trump or so silly. I mean, I miss sometimes Tucker Carlson when I make my videos because I didn't have to distort anything he said. I just used him straight up. And some of those comments today were the same. So I think we're in pretty good shape. I don't think that Pyrrhic victory is the right thing. It's a victory, and there may be bumps in the road. We all many of us, I don't ever want to take anybody for granted, it had a tremendous sigh of relief last night. Sometimes some of us came early in the evening and some later. And there will be bumps ahead, and there will be things we can't predict, but I wouldn't call this a Pyrrhic victory. This was a victory. Whatever happens from here, that's partly up to her and partly up to the campaign and partly up to the media. But I really think we should hold on to this and not worry about it being Pyrrhic. That's another kind of problem. There are Pyrrhic victories in life, but I don't think this one's good. And by the way, I've got COVID for the 3rd time this week. So,
well, feel better. And I will make sure we get a clean recording of your audio, and so it is on the podcast. And please get Chrome or Edge so that you can be recorded on future Dog Shirt TVs.
It'll be interesting to find out when it's done if it really didn't get recorded. You'll find
that
out.
Will be interesting.
Yeah, because if it is, let me know. Either way, let me know. You've got my address.
Sounds good. Great to see you.
Thank you.
And
so it's great to see all of you. It's great to see you, GDF. Thank you.
What do you think? Are we all being too cautious? And Len is right. This is just, no, with the exception of the Biden second term, no presidency is lost or won at a first debate. And so just take the win and don't expect it to do more work than it's going to do. But there's actually no such thing as a Pyrrhic victory in a presidential debate 2 months out.
Well, I guess what I'm worried about is there's just so much happening all the time that things fall out of the headlines so quickly. The RNC, remember that? No, I don't remember it. It was so long ago. The assassination attempt. I mean, Trump.
That never happened. Actually,
didn't happen. Yeah, and it was Harris's fault. But I just worry that today we're talking about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if in 1 week, we don't really remember this as a victory or we don't remember the crazy shit. I think. I kept thinking today about there's a great Substack piece from Dan Dresner who he's talking about he references a Margaret Sullivan column about how the media still hasn't figured out how to cover Donald Trump, but he thinks the problem is that the media has, and they're just covering him like every other candidate. So what they do is they take, like the New York Times, for example, say Donald Trump in the debate talked about immigration. He complained about the economy. And he talked about the third thing. It's not really what he did. I mean, if you're being incredibly charitable,
Pet safety.
yeah, exactly. Like, I guess that was adjacent to immigration and the border, but talking about Haitians eating cats is really a different thing
No,
than
only GDF eats cats.
right.
You can
Yeah,
see it in her title.
but just distilling it into these like topics is the wrong framing. So obviously, GDF cat, who's pro cat eater, will vote for him because she heard it. But yeah, so that's my worry, is that it just, you know, we're people who support Harris are riding high today because it was a great performance, but everything is happening so fast all the time, and we'll just forget about it in like 3 days.
All right, so GDF, you wanted to talk about JD Vance.
Yes, the specter that's been following Trump around like he followed Hillary around that debate stage. It's just every time I hear this guy talk, I cannot tell if he is actually running on the same ticket as Trump, not because he's attacking Trump, but he's painting him in this light that just completely draws this. It acts as a foil to who he really is. And I hear him talk and I go, who are you talking about? Because I mean, even Trump, I didn't talk to him about that. They're just so disparate. It's like two different universes. And I swear, I really feel like he's just really trying to get Trump off the ticket, have his own Kamala Harris moment and get elevated. He's also deeply terrifying. So I wanted to talk about JD Vance. I didn't really have a question. I had a comment. And then I do want to know what you guys think of him, though.
I would also add,
Tyler?
I think Trump is trying to get Vance off the ticket too.
Yes.
Last night, I think it was a question about something that the moderator said something that, you know, Vance said that Trump would do this, and Trump was like, oh, I don't know, I never talked to that guy. Like, actually, I think Trump immediately soured on Vance the second that all of the weird stuff came out, and he's just kind of stuck with him, and he's like very dissatisfied.
It was about the abortion ban, which is so interesting too, because it's that deeply conservative part of his base that he can like push away a little bit. It's like a bad boyfriend, right? Like, I'm not going to pay attention to you, but like I'm still technically in a relationship with you. So I don't know. All right. Sorry, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I have this weird, I have to say this carefully. I'm very prejudiced in my view of JD Vance by having once met him. And as it was an off the record dinner, I am not going to talk about anything that anybody said. I am going to say that it has colored my view of him as so when I met him was in his never Trump phase. And he had just written Hillbilly Elegy, and he was kind of the darling of a lot of moderates and a lot of liberals, actually, as somebody who had a, you know, authentic relationship with this community. And I came away with a very odd impression of him. His wife was there too at this dinner, and Usha was, I thought, lovely and interesting. And he was very peculiar, and he's very bright. He is like the idea that he's got 30 IQ points on Donald Trump. And he believes, as best as I can tell from this interaction and his subsequent behavior, in absolutely nothing. I think I think the idea that he's, you know, a deep-rooted, threatening conservative is as preposterous as the idea that, like, he believes in nothing. And he has made a series of calculations at different times that are all about maximizing his marketability first and then political marketability. And the irony is that I think he's made bad bets, right? Because like, so this is an all-in on a, you know, I don't know what percent chance you assign to Donald Trump winning, but let's give it a very generous, let's say it's 60%. That means you have a 40% chance of being a laughing stock for the rest of your life. And you're 40, right? He's not even 40, or maybe just barely 40. So like, he's, instead of being like a Mitch McConnell Republican, you know, he's got somewhere between a 40 and 60% chance of being Donald Trump's whipping boy for the next 4 years, and the reciprocal chance of being the also ran vice president whose presence sparked the whole weird meme. It'll be unrecoverable from. And so I actually think he's made terrible bets, all in the name of, you know, all because he believes in nothing, he represents nothing. And so he's positioned himself, but ironically, he's positioned himself as a weirdo second to Uncle Ranty. And I just think it's like a terrible career move. And by the way, if they win, that's worse for him than if they lose. You know, then he's gonna be like pushed into some closet in the West, in the old executive office building, and he's going to go to funerals for 4 years. And so like I guess I'm sort of mystified by like the idea he's this sort of Machiavellian schemer to get himself power at a young age. And one way or another, it's going to flame out disastrously for him. That's my read on JD Vance.
I mean, the scariest scenario is that he goes to a funeral and then is elevated to a position that he has no presence being in.
I guess, right? Like the Gerald Fordization of right, that would be the win set. I suppose the other win set is that he gets pushed into a closet for 4 years in a second Trump administration, which is miraculously successful. And so he emerges from it as the presumptive nominee of the party. I think that's...
I mean, it also does assume that we will have another election in 4 years, that there would be a third term. So, well, I mean...
But if we don't, then he loses that way.
But does he, though? Because then he's positioned behind this dictator.
I guess.
I mean, I could go real dark. I won't. But
right. But do you really think, like, all right, let's imagine for a minute. Let's close on this super dark note, but it has a Schadenfreude smile at the end of it, I think. Imagine that Donald Trump wins this election, and there's never another election in the history of the United States. So your darkest fantasies. Do you really think for a second that Donald Trump is going to pass it all on to JD Vance? I mean, it's going to go to Ivanka or Don Jr. or, you know, Melania, right? But it's going to be a dynastic thing. It's not like JD Vance.
I feel so much better. Thanks, Ben.
JD Vance is not he's like the Dmitry Medvedev of this conversation. He's not going to inherit Putin. Hey,
he's going to keep the seat warm. Sorry, go ahead.
It is 6:59, and unlike in lieu of fun, Dog Shirt Daily begins on time and it ends on time, which means we are ending in 35 seconds. Look who is here, who has never been on the show before.
Yes,
do you want to introduce her?
Yeah, I'll take her for a second. She's going to say hi. Hi, Evie. Yeah. This is Evie.
She's kind of being a little...
You're on. This is Evelyn. And this is Andrew.
What's up, legal world? Things I don't understand.
Hello.
Ben, we've just been upstaged.
We have. Look, we're not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to say hello to Evie, who I'm sure will be back. We will be back tomorrow. Mike Pesca will be the guest. I have no idea what we're talking about. But until then, bye. How do you stop this? Oh, stop.